Amazon's The Boys manages a delicate balance between staying faithful to the original comic book series while also charting its own course. The premise may be the same, but the show goes in some very different directions over the course of season 1. From gender-swapped characters to Homelander's big reveal, here are the biggest changes between the comic and the show. One of the most surprising differences is that the comic is even darker and more gratuitous than the show. In fact, The Boys was originally published under DC Comics' Wildstorm imprint, but it got way too gnarly for DC and they abruptly canceled the series and allowed creators Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson to take it somewhere else. The comic is more graphic in its depictions of sex and violence, but it also takes a darker approach to the main characters. Billy, for example, is more intimidating and less sympathetic in the comic, to the point where he eventually becomes as much of a villain as Homelander. Frenchie is meaner and less likable. Even Huey himself is an antisocial conspiracy theory nut, as opposed to the affable superhero geek we see in the show. As in the series, the comic focuses heavily on romance between Huey and Annie. But in the comic, Huey doesn't use that relationship to manipulate Annie and work against the Seven. He doesn't even realize he's dating a superhero at first. And when Billy finds out about their relationship, it leads him to wonder if Huey is actually a mole working for Vought American. Now on the show, Kimiko is the only member of the Boys with superhuman powers, but in the comic, they're all powered up. Billy and his team regularly consume Compound V as a way to level the playing field against the Seven. This difference is also where we find out the origin of the name Mother's Milk. In the comic, we learn that MM has had powers since birth because his mother worked at a factory contaminated with Compound V. Now the upside, MM was born with superhuman strength. The downside, well, he has to regularly drink his mother's breast milk. Ugh. We'll see if that weird origin story makes the jump into the Amazon series. The show focuses on the rivalry between the Boys and the Seven, but in the comic, the Seven are one of many superhero teams operating across the globe. The Boys basically work their way up the ladder using teams like the Teenage Kicks and Payback as practice before going to war with the Seven. While the series does introduce several original heroes of its own in season 1, including the Evangelical Ezekiel and the washed-up mind reader Mesmer, it does feature Teenage Kicks member Popclaw in a significant role, albeit in a relationship with A-Train that doesn't exist in the comic. Now, we did learn at Comic-Con that Payback member Stormfront will be moving from page to screen in season 2, and that actress Aya Cash is going to portray this gender-bent version of the neo-Nazi who is seemingly based on Thor and Shazam. Amazon makes some changes to the cast in terms of ethnicity and nationality. For example, Huey is now American instead of Scottish, and A-Train is now African American instead of white. But the biggest changes are with Mallory and Stillwell, both of whom have been gender swapped from male to female. In the comic, Mallory is a World War II vet whose life was artificially extended by Compound V, a story which the show seems to be ignoring. As for Stillwell, the shift from male to female opens the door for a twisted sexual dynamic between her and Homelander. The fact that Stillwell dies in the season 1 finale is another big change, as Stillwell is the main antagonist of the comic all the way until the end. One of the most gut-wrenching sequences in The Boys Season 1 comes when Homelander and Queen Maeve attempt to rescue Transoceanic Flight 37 from terrorist hijackers. While they easily dispatch the terrorists, Homelander's careless use of heat vision dooms the plane and its passengers. The scene plays out much the same way in the comic, with one big change. That failed rescue mission happens aboard one of the hijacked planes of 9/11. Instead of crashing into the World Trade Center, the plane crashes into the Brooklyn Bridge. Another ripple effect of that change is Maeve's alcoholism. In the books, the plane crash is the root of her alcoholism, whereas she's already fallen down the hole when we meet her in the show. As in the Amazon series, the comic reveals that Billy's hatred of superheroes stems from an incident where Homelander raped Billy's wife, Becca. The details differ quite a bit in the comic, however. The show leads viewers to believe Becca was killed in the process of giving birth to a superhuman child, only for Homelander and Billy to discover that Becca and her son are still alive and hiding. Now in the comic, she did actually die in childbirth. Even worse, Billy himself murdered the superhuman infant. Now what do you think about The Boys? Which bits of the comic do you hope find their way into season 2? Let us know in the comment section down below, and for more on The Boys, check out our review of season 1 and season 1's ending explained. And be sure to subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch.